The clock on the opposite wall had only one hand and no numbers on its face. Around the face were words, "Time to make tea, time to feed the chickens, and you're late." 3 rows of books were stacked on the shelf, books like Cheesemaking Spells, Special Cooking Spells, and The Incredible 1-Minute Feast. The old radio by the sink blared, The Enchanting Hour, with the voice of the famous singing witch, Celestina Warbeck. Mrs. Weasley, absent-mindedly preparing breakfast, was making a lot of noise as she turned the sausages over in the fishbowl. She glanced at her sons from time to time and muttered under her breath, "I don't know what she was thinking, I can't believe it." Mrs. Weasley put 8 or 9 sausages on Harry's plate and reassured him. "Don't make yourself upset. It wasn't your fault. Arthur and I were very worried about you. Just last night we were saying that if Harry didn't send Ron a letter by Friday, we would go and help him ourselves." Mrs. Weasley also put 3 half-cooked eggs on Harry's plate and continued, "But don't drive an illegal car from one side of town to the other. Someone might see it." Mrs. Weasley occasionally tapped the dirty dishes in the sink with her wand, and immediately the dishes would make a clanking sound and be washed. Fred said, "The weather was cloudy, Mom." Mrs. Weasley said grumpily, "Don't talk while eating." George said, "They were keeping Harry hungry. You are doing the same thing." Mrs. Weasley said this more gently and began to spread butter on Harry's toast. At that moment a red-haired child in long pajamas appeared in the doorway, gave a short scream and ran away. Ron said softly to Harry, "That was Ginny. My sister has been praising you all the time since the beginning of the summer." The man laughed and said, "Yeah, now wait, he'll definitely ask you to give him your picture." But immediately his mother glared at him and he fell silent and lowered his head. No one said anything else and everyone finished their breakfast with incredible speed. They ate. Fred put his spoon and fork on his plate and yawned. Said, "I'm so tired. I want to go to sleep." Mrs. Weasley said angrily, "You don't sleep at all. You wanted to stay awake until morning. You must be a ghost for me. Remove the garden soil, they are growing." "Oh Mom, no." Mrs. Weasley looked at George and Ron and said, "You two should help him." Then he turned to Harry and said, "Honey, you can go upstairs and sleep, you didn't ask them to. They're coming after you with that broken-down car." But Harry, who was cheerful, said, "I'll help Ron, because I've never seen anyone bring out a ghost before. Thank you for your kindness, my dear, but this is very tiring. Let me see what Lockhart says about it in his book." Mrs. Weasley pulled a thick book from the row of books on the shelf. George Grulland said grumblingly, "Mom, we know how to get rid of the earth and fairy." Harry looked at the cover of the book Mrs. Weasley was holding. It read, in gold lettering, Gilderoy Lockhart's Guide to Housekeeping. It had a large photograph of a handsome wizard with curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes on the cover. Like all the other photographs in the wizarding world, it was animated. The wizard, who Harry assumed was Gilderoy Lockhart, was winking at them all from the cover. Mrs. Weasley, seeing the photograph, he smiled and said, "She is a unique magician who knows all the tricks of housekeeping. Her book is excellent." The man said in a not-so-quiet voice, "Mom likes it very much." Mrs. Weasley blushed and said, "Don't play around, Fred, if you think you're better than Lockhart, get busy." "But what if I come and see the earth and elf in the garden?" The boys, yawning and grumbling, went out into the yard. Harry followed them. Their large garden was just the way Harry liked it. Of course, the Solis didn't like it at all, because it was full of weeds and the grass had to be cut short. There were gnarled, crooked trees all around. Here and there, flowering shrubs were drowning in flowers. They were the most colorful things Harry had ever seen in his life. The large green pond in the garden was also full of frogs. Harry looked at them as they walked across the garden lawn. Ron said, "Gave, did you know that Muggles also have Earth Elves?" "Yes, I've seen those things that Muggles call Earth Elves. Then he bent down and searched under a peony bush and continued. They're not like fat, dwarf Santas with a fishing rod in their hands. There was a rustling sound and the peony bush shook. Ron. He straightened his back and said with a confused expression. This is an earth genie. The earth elf shouted. Don't let go. Don't let go. The earth elf looked nothing like Santa Claus, a stiff little creature with a large, hairless head like a potato, and it flailed in the air on its little horned legs. Ron held it at a distance. Then he grabbed the earth elf's legs tightly, turned it upside down, and said, all you have to do is this. Then he lifted the dust elf above his head and began to spin it in the air. As Ron's eyes fell on Harry's stunned expression, he continued. They won't get hurt at all this way, we just have to confuse them so much that they can't find their nest anymore. Finally, Ron threw the earth elf. The earth elf landed on the hedge 20 feet away. Fred said. Poor thing. I bet there's an earth elf under that tree stump. Harry soon realized that he shouldn't show mercy to earth elves. He decided. He threw the first elf stuck in the hedge, but he did it clumsily and the elf bit Harry's hand hard with its sharp teeth. Harry could barely pull it out of his hand, and when he threw it. Oh, what a slap you have, Harry. He fell 15 meters further. A moment later, the space above the courtyard was filled with elves, who were thrown into the air one after another. George, who had caught 5 or 6 earthen elves with one hand, said. See? They're not smart enough to realize we're bringing them out, they all come out to watch. When you think they're scared, they stay in their nests. After a while, all the earth elves, their shoulders slumped, walked away like a defeated army. As everyone watched the elves emerge from the garden hedge, Ron said. They come back again, Dad is very fond of them, saying, these are delicious. Just then the door to the yard opened. George said. It's Dad. Dad came. Everyone hurried through the garden and rushed into the house. Mr. Weasley took off his glasses and slumped down on the kitchen chair with his eyes closed. He was a thin man, his head was going bald, but his thinning hair was as red as his children's. He wore a long green robe that was dingy and unkempt. When everyone sat down around him, he groped around for the teapot and muttered. What a night it was. Not until the inspection, not until my back was to the mundangas, old Fletcher wanted to cast a spell on me. Mr. Weasley took a sip of tea and sighed. Fred asked eagerly. Dad, did you find anything? Mr. Weasley yawned and said. Just a few keys that were getting smaller and a kettle that was leaking. Of course, there were other nonsense that didn't concern us. They arrested Mortlick to question him about some strange weasels. Thank God that's the work of the Experimental Word Committee. George J. said. Why should anyone bother making the keys smaller? Mr. Weasley sighed and said. Just to annoy muggles. They sell these keys to muggles and then the keys get so small that there's nothing left of them and when muggles need them they can't find them. The poor things can't be blamed because they never admit that their keys have gotten small. They insist that their keys keep getting lost. Even if someone casts a spell in front of them, they'll deny magic at all costs. You wouldn't believe the things we cast. Like a car. Mrs. Weasley appeared, holding a long skewer like a sword. Mr. Weasley opened his eyes in a panic, stared guiltily at his wife, and said. Honey, did you say car? Mrs. Weasley said, her eyes sparkling. Yes, Arthur, think about the car, the wizard, the car, the door, and the wreckage. He buys it and tells his wife that he just wants to take it apart to figure out how it works, when in reality he magically turns it into a flying machine. My dear, be sure that he has not gone beyond the limits of the law. Of course, it would have been better if he had told his wife the truth. There is a note in our laws that says, if someone does not intend to use a flying car, even if the car can fly. Mrs. Weasley shouted. Arthur Weasley, with that note of stuff, you were able to keep all that junk in the warehouse. Now, let you know that this morning Harry came here in the very car you didn't intend to use," Mr. Weasley said out of nowhere. "Harry? Which Harry?" He looked around and jumped when he saw Harry. "No, Dad, is this Harry Potter? It's so nice to see you. Ron complimented you so much." "Was doing?" Mrs. Weasley shouted. "Your boys went to Harry's house in the flying car last night and didn't come back. Again. Do you have anything to say?" Mr. Weasley said eagerly. "Seriously? Was it flying well? I mean..." Mr. Weasley, seeing the flames of anger blazing from his wife's eyes. He was speechless and continued. "You did a very bad thing, guys. You did a very bad thing." When Mrs. Weasley blew her trumpet like a frog in a fit of rage, Ron was whispering to Harry. "Leave them alone, let's go and I'll show you my room." They left the kitchen and walked down a narrow hallway until they reached a strange zigzag staircase. At the landing of the third floor, they saw a game in the middle. Through the door, Harry saw a pair of light brown eyes staring at them. He immediately slammed the door shut. Ron said. "This was Ginny. I'm surprised she's so shy, she's never been so quiet for a moment and hasn't said a word before." They went up 2 more flights of stairs and came to a door with peeling paint and a small plaque that read, "Ronald's room." Harry entered the room. His head hit the sloping ceiling and he blinked. Harry was reminded of a bakery oven when he saw the furnishings. All of Ron's furnishings were bright orange. The bedspread, the walls, even the ceiling were orange. Then Harry's eyes fell on the large posters that covered the faded orange wallpaper. There were several pictures of 7 witches and wizards in orange robes, each holding a flying broomstick and waving enthusiastically at them. Harry said. "Are these the players on the popular Quidditch team?" "Yes, Tim Chadley Cannons." Ron pointed to his orange bedspread, which had 2 large, shiny black CS and a cannonball on it, and continued. "They are ranked 9th in the standings." Ron's school magic books were piled up in a corner, and next to them were several comic books, all of which had the words, "The Adventures of Martin Meigs, the Mad Muggle." Ron's magic wand was on a jar full of frog eggs that sat on the windowsill. Spot, mouse. Fat and lazy Ron was also napping by the pond in the sunlight. Harry stepped over a deck of playing cards that were falling to the floor and looked out the small window. His eyes fell on a group of earth elves sneaking through the hedge of the Weasleys' house. Then he turned and looked at Ron, who was anxiously waiting for Harry to comment on his room. Ron said something before Harry could say anything. He said. "It's not a bit like the room you had in the Muggle house. Mine is right under the attic giant's room, which is constantly banging on the door and wall and snoring. Kills." Harry laughed broadly and said. "I have never seen a better house than this." Ron's ears turned red.